Motörhead has died at the age of 70 after very recently being diagnosed with an aggressive cancer. Lemmy was known for his fast and furious bass guitar playing and his gravelly voice. Born in Kilmister, he was a roadie for Jimi Hendrix before joining Hawkwind and then founding Motörhead. Lemmy died in Los Angeles. There are plenty of tributes to him appearing from friends and rock stars on social media. In the words of his band, he was born to lose but lived to win. In their message on Facebook, the surviving members of Motörhead asked fans to celebrate his life by playing his music loud, having a drink or a few, and sharing stories. Metallica, the US heavy metal band, tweeted to say Lemmy was one of the primary reasons it existed at all, and it was forever grateful for his inspiration. The Queen guitarist Brian May said, "Sitting here, retweeting, distracted, wondering what I can possibly say about our utterly unique friend Lemmy's passing. Ouch." Ozzy Osbourne of Black Sabbath wrote, "Lost one of my best friends today. He'll be sadly missed. He was a warrior and a legend. I'll see you on the other side." And beyond the music world, lots more, including American former professional wrestler Corey Graves posting this photo of himself sitting at a table with the man he called one of his heroes. Well, let's go to Oxford now, where we can speak to rock author Joel McIver, who wrote about Lemmy and his band in his book Overkill, The Untold Story of Motörhead. Joel, thanks for joining us on BBC World. To some extent, this is a classic rock and roll lifestyle, isn't it? Drink, drugs, lots of one-night stands, a really heavy life. What do you think was unique or particularly special about Lemmy?
Right, there's something that you and your viewers have to take away from this, and that it's very easy to get sucked into those crazy rock and roll anecdotes. It's true that Lemmy did work his way through thousands of women, who he respected greatly, by the way, and always refused to talk about in the media. He did inhale an insane amount of drugs, he drank a lot of booze, but I need people to look through that. What we had here was a truly great man, a philosopher, an intellectual, a man who was incredibly educated and informed on a variety of important subjects. So I don't want people to be sucked in by the amusing anecdotes, if possible.
Yeah, Joel, we're looking at Lemmy on stage at the moment, but off stage, it is really important that he was never short of an opinion. And on the big issues of his day, like look at legalising heroin or look at child abuse, he had a lot to say and he'd thought a lot about it.
He did. He had an incredible amount of very informed opinions about a lot of subjects which affect everybody. And that, I think, is what transcended him from merely being a musician. He had an awful lot to say. Politicians sought his advice. He was very understanding of many social issues which plague us. And the great thing about him, I thought, was that he continued to live the lifestyle. He was unapologetic about what he did, but he was concerned about people. He was a passionate, kind man, believe it or not. He
was diagnosed just a few days ago, wasn't he? I mean, his death came very suddenly. So
he turned 70 on Christmas Eve. Very few people expected him to live that long because of the lifestyle that he'd led. He received a cancer diagnosis 2 days later and then died 2 days after that, surrounded by his family at his home. And to me, that's a pretty clean, satisfying way to go. If you're going to go, that's a way I would take.
So what would you say is his legacy, not just in terms of his style of music, but in the way he chose to live his life? I mean, obviously at the fastest possible pace, but as you're saying, more of a Renaissance man than a lot of us give him credit for.
I absolutely want people to understand that. If they read his interviews and they read his autobiography from a few years ago, they'll understand the depth of his perception. You ask about his legacy. I mean, musically, there would be a much reduced sort of heavy rock and heavy metal scene without Motörhead. But more than that, he was a man who proved that you can be a proper rock star and not lose your identity and not lose your intelligence and be swallowed up. He had an awful lot of interesting things to say, and he was unapologetic and he was honest. And those are the things that I really want people to remember about Lemmy.
And so do you think there are musicians out there today who still have a direct link to what he brought to music?
Well, Metallica are the obvious example. They began their careers in Los Angeles as a Motörhead and Diamond Head covers band, essentially. And they've always been very open about the impact that Motörhead had on them. But again, I can't overstress this. I want people to understand that his impact and his legacy is not just a musical one.
Metal Hammer magazine editor-in-chief Alexander Milas. And Alexander, quite a shock. This was a very sudden diagnosis and sudden death.
Oh, it certainly was, although for some time I think we were all aware that Lemmy wasn't in the greatest state of health. He appeared at the Classic Rock Awards a few months ago, and he's probably looking a little more frail than we were accustomed to.
He was obviously very well known, and very well known for his very rock and roll lifestyle, the women, the drugs, the drinking. But I know a point you want to get over is he was not a celeb. He didn't like celeb culture.
Oh, no, that's absolutely correct. Now, I think we just have to be really clear. I mean, Lemmy was absolutely the personification of rock and roll, and it was a lifestyle choice for him. It wasn't just a form of music that he played, but it was also what he was the embodiment of, which is a bit of an outlaw spirit. But I would hate for that to overshadow the fact that he was such a gifted songwriter and such a talented lyricist. He walked the walk, but he also played some fantastic music as well.
Let's just bring in some more of the tributes that have been paid to him. I mean, just looking at his band, for example, said, "Born to lose but live to win," and put a message on Facebook in which the surviving members of Motörhead are asking fans to celebrate his life by playing his music loud, having a drink, many drinks, sharing stories. Metallica, the US heavy metal band, tweeted to say Lemmy was one of the primary reasons it exists at all. Metallica is forever grateful for his inspiration. And just one more, the Queen guitarist Brian May saying, "I'm sitting here, I'm retweeting, I'm wondering what I can possibly say about the passing of our utterly unique friend Lemmy." And that point from Metallica, I mean, there are several bands, lots of musicians who wouldn't be what they are now without him.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just, I mean, no Motörhead, no Metallica, no Motörhead, no Guns N' Roses, hands down one of the most influential bands, but I think they also represented a kind of humility as well. Just their dogged touring and their attitude, as you said, toward celebrity, where I think they kind of had an allergic regard for a lot of the trappings of fame, because Lemmy was an everyman. He might have represented, you might say, a bit of a middle finger to the establishment, but he was also incredibly approachable as well.
He was never short of an opinion. I mean, his songs, his lyrics they might be anti-war, anti-child abuse, they might talk about drugs, the whole lifestyle, but he covered a lot of ground.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Lemmy was an intellectual. You know, I think you can kind of mistake the onstage persona for someone who is always living that way off stage, but
sure. I
had the incredible privilege of sitting down with him to interview him once or twice, and what really came across is just how articulate he was and how well-read he was as well. He didn't want to talk about how great it was to be a rock star. He wanted to talk about the politics of the day, historic wars, you name it, because he was a genuinely inquisitive person.
So he probably hated sound bites, but I am going to ask you to sum him up.
The ultimate outlaw. I mean, he played rock and roll. He was rock and roll.
Alexander Milas, thank you very much for coming in to talk about this. Thank you.
No one sounded quite like Motörhead. Fast, raucous, and very, very loud. And no one looked quite like Lemmy. Those teeth, that head-up position, those whiskers. But it wasn't always like this. He played with the Rocking Vickers, a band that lit up the Northwest ballrooms in the 1960s.
I was a terrible guitarist. I was getting away with murder, you know. Just turn it up and put a lot of fuzz tone on it and move your fingers on it very fast, you know. But nobody was really for long, you know. So, and then I got hold of this bass. I'd never played one before, you know. And it was great. I went straight into it. And then I ended up in Hawkwind.
Hawkwind's space rock made the charts with their biggest hit. Their usual vocalist couldn't quite get it right, and as a last resort, they asked Lemmy to have a go.
Yeah, they didn't want me to sing it. They tried everybody else singing it except me, because I was a new guy, you know. And then they had to ask me to try it because nobody else could do it. Nobody else could hit the high note.
Thrown out of Hawkwind, Lemmy formed Motörhead and got back to basics. After a faltering start, they recorded their breakthrough album. The title track became their anthem. They never looked back. Lemmy embraced rock and roll excess, the girls, the booze, the drugs, and the incessant touring.
I've been on the road now, man and boy, for almost 3 years, I'm actually only 17, you know. I mean, there's some days you don't feel like it as much as others, but that's, I'm sure, much the same in plumbing. I love you, baby. I know you do much.
By any reasonable standards, he shouldn't have survived. But unlike many of his contemporaries, he just kept on rocking.
If I have to die and be on my deathbed regretting decisions I made, I'm not interested in that, man. I want to die there completely satisfied that I did the best I could, you know what I mean?